Even though there are unfortunately an unending number of new domestic violence cases, I wanted to take a moment to look back at a few that we've covered previously. There have been some updates in cases and some that are still being investigated. Others that are about to go before the courts. We can't ever forget those who have lost their lives at the hands of people who profess to love them, because if we do, we'll never stop the epidemic of intimate partner violence that is wreaking havoc across the world. Hi friends, how is everyone today? I hope you are all well. Before we go any further, I just want to run through the usual disclaimer. We discuss true crime cases involving domestic abuse and domestic homicide on this channel. Everything I present here is just information that I have found online and my own opinions. So please always do your own research and draw your own conclusions. If you find this content valuable, I hope you consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons, because it helps to push these videos out to more people, and by doing so together we can spread awareness of the warning signs of domestic abuse that people may otherwise overlook. That is ultimately why I cover these cases. So with all that being said, let's get into today's updates. Let's start with Ruqia Haidari. We covered this case in May of 2022. The original video will be linked below. A quick overview for those who haven't seen it though. Ruqia was a 21-year-old young lady who was forced to marry a man she had met only twice. Her family received a $15,000 dowry for her. However, Ruqia didn't want to be married. She also did not want to move across the country. She reached out for help from friends, teachers, and ultimately the Australian Federal Police. But she was a young girl torn. She didn't want to disappoint her mother. Once she was married and moved to Perth from her Victorian home, she begged her mother to be allowed to come back. Her mother's response: "We will only take back your dead body." Unfortunately, that is what it came to when her husband of just 6 weeks called her brother to tell him to come and get her body as she lay bleeding to death. He had slit her throat. He left her there and drove himself to a police station to turn himself in. He's serving a life sentence with a minimum of 19 years. This year, Ruqia's mother was prosecuted and is the first person in Australia to be convicted under the forced marriage laws. Through the trial, the court heard that Ruqia had been first forced to enter an unofficial religious marriage at the age of 15, a union that ended after 2 years, and that she did not want to marry again until she was 27 or 28. Even though Sakina Mohammed Jan pleaded not guilty, the judge sentenced her to at least a year in jail for what the judge called the intolerable pressure she had placed on her daughter. A year. I mean, it's something, but I'd say it's something closer to despicable than justice. In saying that, some people worry that a conviction of this type may deter victims from coming forward at all, knowing that their loved ones may face jail time. There are a number of other cases before the courts and under investigation, so this is far from an isolated incident. Please, if you know anyone who's in a situation like this, let them know that there is help out there and people do care. 60 Minutes just covered this case when Ruqia's mother was sentenced, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Our second update today is in regards to Fawn Mountain. The full video is linked below, but I'll run through a quick catch up. In 2009, Fawn met Heather Dybert. This was Fawn's first relationship with a woman. Her previous relationship had been abusive and led her to having her 2 children removed from her care. After a brief honeymoon phase, her relationship with Heather quickly turned abusive also. Heather was possessive and at first used coercive control, which soon became physical. Fawn was isolated from friends and family. Heather would not allow her to work. She wasn't allowed to have a phone and was frequently locked in the car while Heather was working, or in the trailer they shared while Heather was out. Heather was known to strangle Fawn, which is all too often a chilling precursor to homicide in abusive relationships. Fawn tried to leave a number of times, however, Heather was in control, even to the point of having Fawn's mother arrested and calling the police on Fawn herself when she went back to the home that they'd previously shared to retrieve her belongings when Heather wasn't there. Heather had eyes everywhere, and she always managed to draw Fawn back in. That was until Fawn disappeared without a trace on the 25th of November 2012. Heather and her father did a complete remodel of the trailer, and the family sold their butcher shop. If that isn't sus enough, the trailer was eventually burnt down. Despite being the last person to have seen Fawn, and whenever asked, coming up with crazy explanations about how Fawn had run off and was now in jail in another state, Heather was never named as a suspect in Fawn's disappearance. And unfortunately, I'm not here to tell you that there's been a change in that. However, Heather, who is now 43, is facing 32 felony charges, including attempted solicitation, conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to aggravated arson, bodily injury and criminal solicitation to attempt conspiracy to commit murder. That's a mouthful. See, she hired a guy to set her estranged wife's house on fire with her and her whole family inside. Her attorney asked that her bail be reduced from $1 million closer to $100,000, but the prosecutor argued that this was a heinous case and requested it remain at the $1 million. The magisterial district judge said, quote, "Based on the evidence, the facts, the PFAs and her history, I'm more inclined to deny bail altogether because I don't believe that any amount would ensure compliance and protect the parties involved." End quote. She left Heather's bail at $1 million. Unable to pay, Heather was remanded to the Bedford County Correctional Facility. The Bedford County courtroom was standing room only, as more than just attorneys, security, court staff, media, and witnesses filled the seats. Several people wearing purple shirts emblazoned with the name Fawn Marie Mountain sat in the last row to watch the proceedings. Everyone who loves and misses Fawn is hoping that Heather finally pays for the abuse that she's been inflicting on people for decades. They also hope that this will be the push that brings Fawn's case back into the spotlight and gets some answers as to what happened back in November of 2012. I'll keep an eye on how this unfolds and let you know. Our final case update is a doozy. This is in regards to the trial for the killing of Jorge or George Torres. Again, the original video is linked below, but here is a recap. George Torres lived with Sarah Boone. Sarah refers to him as George, so for clarification going forward, I will also. These two had been living together for about a year and a half, and by all accounts, theirs was not an ideal relationship. There were numerous instances of the police being called for domestic disturbances, with each of them at times being charged with domestic violence offences. That is, until the day in 2020, Sarah called the police to tell them that her boyfriend, George, was dead in a suitcase. And no, the suitcase was not being used as a means of disposal. It was the murder weapon. Sarah made claims that she and George had been playing the night before, and George had gotten into the suitcase and she'd partially zipped it up. She then went upstairs and fell asleep. By her account, she was unaware that he was unable to get out. However, when the police looked through her phone, they found videos she'd taken taunting George, who was clearly struggling in the suitcase and telling her that he couldn't breathe. She was arrested, and she was shocked by this because this was all unintentional and they'd been having a good night, as she repeated ad nauseum throughout her interrogation. If you haven't watched it, it's a wild ride. I'll link that below also. So when I first covered this case, I told you it was unresolved. Well, it's still unresolved, and that's because Sarah Boone went through 8 court-appointed attorneys before the judge had had enough and told her that she wasn't entitled to any more court-appointed counsel, so she would have to retain counsel independently or represent herself. After 4 years of this woman, I don't blame him. She has written copious amounts of letters to him, the judge, and anyone else you can think of, the latest to the judge being 58 pages long. The judge finally set a date to begin her trial, and she asked for a continuance because she had to get her head around defending herself. He said no. Sarah also put out a call for an attorney willing to work with her. This is her flyer. And yes, she's a special kind of delusional, but I guess if you don't ask, you don't receive. And she found someone willing to take on her case. James Owens is his name, and he sure has his work cut out for him. Around the time Mr. Owens came on board, Sarah filed a motion to dismiss her case. Get this, because she had been denied the right to a speedy trial. Well, yeah, that's because you couldn't keep a lawyer to save your life. Literally. The judge, of course, dismissed that and has denied any request put before him to delay the trial any further. So Sarah Boone will finally be going to court to face the second-degree murder charges in relation to George's death. The trial begins on the 7th of October. I really feel for the judge in this case. He is so professional and composed while he deals with her, but she is what I would call an exhauster. I used to live with one. They will continue to talk and gaslight and deny and take things in circles until you're so frustrated and over it and brain damaged and you need to get away from them that you just say, whatever, okay, you're right, just go away. And it seems that this is the way that she has made her way through life. This is how she's always gotten what she wanted. And this is the first time that it's not working for her. It's going to be a circus if she takes the stand, and she is the type to. She thinks she's the smartest person in the room, and she believes she can talk her way out of anything. I'll keep you posted with further updates and the outcome of the trial. But I won't be covering it because there will be so many people watching over this one. The Lawyer You Know, Court TV, Emily D. Baker, I'm sure, will all have coverage and they'll have more insight into the legalities of it all than I do. So once it's all over, we will maybe discuss that then. She is, I believe, she's just put forward a request to be able to use the battered spouse defense and consequently has asked that her remarks to the original officers that she spoke with about it being an accident, she doesn't want those to be presented in court. But we'll see how that pans out because that was only just raised. Depositions are happening this week as far as I'm aware, and then trial starts on the 7th. So we'll see how that all goes. But that's all I have for you today, my friends. If you are finding this content valuable, please like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell icon so you don't lose my little channel. And please leave your thoughts about these cases in the comments box below. As always, there is a list of resources below if the content around these cases has raised any concerns for you regarding your own relationship or that of a loved one. Thanks for being here, and until next time, please take care of yourselves and be kind to one another.